Welcome to the Realm Kast. I am your host, the Mortal Kombat FANTiM, and with me as always is my co-host, our lore master, Yanni. Welcome, Yanni.
Thanks, FANTiM.
This week we have writer Jeremy Adams with us. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Most of our listeners would know you as the screenplay writer for Mortal Kombat Scorpion's Revenge.
Woo woo. now on HBO Max. Watch it.
That's right. Yeah, it just got released on HBO Max, and I've already watched it about 3 more times, not counting times leading up to the live action movie release. So,
oh, that's good. Well, I'm glad you liked it. I mean, it was just an unusual project because what had happened was I'm constantly talking about martial arts around the office to the point that people are like, "Could you just shut up?" And I would be talking about it a lot about DC Comics because I really like the DC Comics martial arts scene, which inevitably led to the movie I did with Bruce Timm called Batman: Soul of the Dragon, which is martial arts oriented.
Yeah.
And what happened was, I guess Sam Registers, the president of Warner Animation, got together with NetherRealm, Ed Boon and stuff, and they were going to do an animated thing. And everybody was just like, "Oh, Jeremy's the only one that can do this because he's just nuts about video games and he's nuts about everything, and especially martial arts." And so, it was really interesting because it was like, originally the mandate was we want to do it a little different. And so I had to kind of, it's hard because you guys are Mortal Kombat fans. It's a huge history. It's a huge lore. And I really thought, okay, I'm only going to have this many minutes to tell a Mortal Kombat story. Like, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you bring people on board? And originally, we were going to focus more on the Scorpion angle, but there was also requests from other people like, "Hey, we need to really work on that, pivot onto the first tournament too." So it's an interesting thing because I had a great time making it. There were some things like Jennifer Carpenter as Sonya, but Joel McHale, Johnny Cage was like otherworldly to me. That really made us laugh. And Rick, who's the executive producer, which in animation circles is kind of like the guy who puts it all together, and Ethan, who's the director. And in fact, on the DVD, which is funny, is they have an audio commentary. A, it was the first audio commentary I've ever done. And B, I hadn't seen the movie. And so it was like, okay, let's do the audio commentary. And I'm screaming through half the movie going, "Oh my gosh," because I had only seen a snippet of when Hanzo just goes total ham on everybody in the village originally, because I'm scatterbrained. Talk about scatterbrained. I had written the script. I had turned it in. NetherRealm told me it was too violent and too vulgar. And I said, "What?" I go, "Have you paid attention to what you're doing? Because you do it way more than me." So I scaled it back. But then the storyboard guys who were just like let loose, ramped it up to 11.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh." And the only thing that's sad is I wish we would have been able, because it came out like a couple weeks after COVID, I think. Or something like that. It was like a month after COVID really shut down the States. Otherwise, we were supposed to premiere it, I think, in New York, and we were going to have like it would have been a perfect midnight movie. Honestly, a real perfect midnight movie. But it was really fun to take a little spin on it, and hopefully we'll get to see more.
So, were you a Mortal Kombat fan before you actually wrote this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a kid of a certain age. Basically, what happened was, you'd go to, we used to have these pizza joints that had arcade games. And I don't know I feel like Street Fighter came out first. I'm not sure if that's right. But I remember everybody playing Street Fighter. And then suddenly Mortal Kombat showed up. And it felt like we were getting away with something naughty playing. You know what I mean? It's like somebody get uppercutted off the bridge into the spikes, and we're looking around like, if our parents see this, we are dead. They're gonna straight fatality us, And then I could only play Raiden fairly well. My friend was a Scorpion freak, and he would keep, jumping off the screen, hitting me from the other side, and I'm like, "I hate you!" And there was no internet, so we were trying to figure out how to do the fatalities, and somebody would figure it out. We're like, how could you possibly figure that out? I mean, you spent gobs of quarters on this thing, So obviously I was a fan of the game. And then the 95 movie came out, and I like the 95 movie a lot.
Mhm.
So, I mean, it's not as gory, obviously. But at that time, I was obsessed with Highlander. So Christopher Lambert was in it. I was like, I have to watch this. And then you had, Johnny Cage. I still think it was a great, intro to Johnny Cage. This is the part where you fall down, I think. And it was what it was. Honestly, up until that point, it's like every video game movie was terrible. Like I shouldn't say terrible, but it pretty much was like Mario Brothers.
It was definitely terrible.
Yeah, Double Dragon. Even though I love Mark Dacascos, it was like, maybe not. And but this was like, it was relatively good with really good martial art choreography. Like there's that fight between Johnny and Scorpion that's just so good. And I since found out, it was funny, but when I moved to LA, I'm living in this apartment, and our next door neighbor is a former stunt guy who worked on Mortal Kombat. And I ended up talking to him because I love martial art movies, and he was telling me, oh yeah, I worked on Mortal Kombat, and it was all the Hapkido guys that I ended up learning from myself, but like just this really fast-paced martial arts fight scenes that I really like, because there's this tendency now in martial art movies to move in close because maybe the actors don't know martial arts, so they'll shake the camera and they'll be so close you don't know really what's going on. And when you get a movie like Raid Redemption or even the MK95, it's like they pull back and you can actually see these people kick and move, and it can be really quite fun. But then obviously the lore started getting deeper and deeper, and I lost track of it. I don't know, somewhere in the middle. And I'd play the games and I would get them or whatever and skip through. And then as I started jumping back into it, especially as I was trying to just make sure I wasn't being too egregious with the lore, because it's intense and it's extensive. Dominic over at NetherRealm and Ed Boon were really instructive. Like, hey, listen, you can't do this. You can do that. You can push it here, but you can't push it there, because we only had a limited time to make, a limited space to make a Mortal Kombat movie. And it's like, are we going to hit all the points? No. But like, do I want to touch on the Kamidago? Do I want to touch on like all the other pieces? It's like, yeah, absolutely. But it's such a deep, deep lore that it's going to take much longer to hit everything. But we got the tournament, we got the characters, we got the main premise, so.
And Shinnok's amulet, like you managed to sneak in a lot of things into this movie.
Well, even the Quan Chi, the element of like, Sub-Zero not being Sub-Zero, like we were trying to do that stuff. Listen, I'm not lying. I know that New Line wanted to see our script in animatics before they even shot their movie. And I was very surprised when I watched the live action. I was like, hey, this opening looks really familiar. But yeah, it's one of those, I think what I love about Mortal Kombat in general, it's almost like what G.I. Joe was when I was growing up. It's this weird pastiche of things like, oh, it has ninjas and it has wizards and it has guys with guns. And, it's like, that's the type of stuff. It has a little bit of everything.
The perfect blend.
Yes, the perfect blend. And they just they did exactly like, I don't know how familiar you are with G.I. Joe, but when it came out, the thing that was glorious about it was like, here are these action figures, but then you flip the toy on the back and it would have a file card.
Yeah.
It tell you everything about the character, and it gave you kind of a bit of a story and it invested you in it. And I think that's what Mortal Kombat's done. It's like, here are all these characters and we want to give you a little bit of story about them and why they're here and what they're doing. And then with the realms and the fight between the realms, like all that stuff is really, really cool.
I was just thinking, I found it interesting that you mentioned, the whole Johnny and Scorpion fight and, your love for the 95 movie and such. Because I think as Scorpion's Revenge released, that was right when we started the podcast. And we actually reviewed Scorpion's Revenge as we interviewed Chris Casamassa, who played Scorpion in the movie.
That's funny. That's great.
Let's talk a little bit more about your history with Mortal Kombat, before we jump too much into the movie. Did you have a favorite character growing up with the series?
Well, okay. So I'm a sucker for a couple of different archetypes. One, I love Liu Kang, but that's just because I love Ryu. I love any dude with a headband that is the chosen one. It's like, oh, you got me at the chosen one. I really like Liu Kang. I love Johnny Cage, but like, you got to understand, when Johnny Cage appeared, it was like I was on the Van Damme train. Like he would not, I was like, Claude Van Damme is the greatest human being ever, and I was like, this guy's straight out of Bloodsport. So I love that. So I always kind of followed that. I like how pompous he kind of became as the series went on.
Yeah.
Scorpion is the Wolverine, right? Like he's the guy that I just kind of find myself going, I don't, especially at the beginning, it's like, I don't know who this guy is, but he throws a spear and yells, "Get over here." And FYI, like one of my friends was so obsessed with it, and we were really into martial arts. I remember him challenging this guy at a dojo. This is a true story. He was supposed to be quote unquote a Wing Chun master. And my friend, the only martial art training he had ever had was playing Mortal Kombat. And he was straight up like, okay, listen, dude, your Kung Fu's garbage. And this guy's, okay, let's spar. And so my friend I have a videotape somewhere, I don't know where, but he puts on gloves and he starts fighting him. And I swear to you, all he's trying to do is like Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter moves on this Wing Chun guy. And I'm telling you, he's winning. And we're like howling. We're like, what is happening? And in the middle of the fight, he goes, "Get over here." And he like dives at the guy. And I was like, this is happening. Like, it was so funny. It was the coolest thing ever. But yeah, it was really, really funny. So I have an affection for Scorpion. I have more of an affection now because once I got in, to the nitty gritty of Scorpion, and I thought, here's the John Wick of it is my family was killed, and then it's like, I was killed, but it's like, I want revenge so bad I'm willing to fight my way out of hell.
Yeah.
It's like, is such a cool, like, what? I could have done the whole movie just that, and in Scorpion's Revenge, it's like, there's different retcons about where he gets his spear chain. And I was like, I love the idea. And what we put in the movie, obviously, is that that's what he's being hung up by and tortured by these demons. And that's the thing that becomes his weapon, that's his prison. And so I really like Scorpion too. But listen, Johnny Cage doing the splits, hitting people in the balls is always going to be funny to me. Luke Cage,
we have a question about that later on, actually. So
yeah. Wait, about Sonya kicking him in the balls? Because I will tell you, I had more of that in the script, and they were like, "Oh my gosh!" They literally like, "Okay, dude, like we can't have her kick him in the balls anymore." And I go, "But it's hilarious!" Like, so that's really
yeah. We'll jump into that.
So all these characters you mentioned are basically from Mortal Kombat 1. What would you say your favorite Mortal Kombat game is?
Oh man, that's tough, dude. I'm trying to think. Was it X when they started doing the X-ray stuff more?
Yes.
And
9 as well. 9 started them, really.
9 started it, yeah. I thought that was cool. I mean, I was playing some of the Mortal Kombat 11 stuff, and it's so violent. I mean, Mortal Kombat X is so violent. Like they get progressively just so vicious. Like, I know you guys are going to talk about fatalities, and we had to go through like the last game, and we were just kind of like looking at the fatalities, and we're just looking at each other like, no one could ever, like, I was like, they can never say we're too violent. Never.
Right.
Because this is just out of control.
By the time 11 came out, they started doing like that facial recognition stuff. And I've said this before, it made it too real for me. I couldn't handle it.
It's too much. It's too much. So like, it's also weird because I'm going to confuse some of this stuff, so you'll have to forgive me. When did Cassie Cage and those guys jump in?
X.
And it was all X. I had spreadsheets upon spreadsheets and Wikipedias out to try to keep everything right.
You need that for Mortal Kombat, so don't worry.
Yeah, I know you really do, because you're also like, okay, are they rebooting it? What are they doing? How are they doing it? Especially the first few, because, the main premise of Mortal Kombat being like, oh yeah, this tournament happens once in a generation. And then it's like, well, the second one, it's like, well, we're going to just kind of fix that a little bit so we can do another. I really had to walk a thin line. It is interesting you say that, though. That's a hard question. What are your guys's?
Myself, I love Mortal Kombat 2. Like,
why?
It's always because that was my main intro into the game. That's when Mortal Kombat 1 had the graphics and stuff, but they weren't quite there yet. Like it was almost like a concept. And then Mortal Kombat 2 is when it all fleshed out and you're seeing real people fighting on a video game screen. And it's just crazy for me.
Right. I get that. I get that.
How about you, Yanni?
For me, it's between Deception and 9. Deception had like the perfect sort of lore aspect to it. I love the atmosphere,
With Onaga
the conquest.
and all that
Exactly.
stuff.
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad to hear you say this.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's the stuff that's cool. But again, they would like move off, you know, with like, what's it called? And they did like, what was the one? I'm trying to think of the one. It was like, it wasn't the Shaolin one. It was Deadly Alliance, right? No, not Deadly Alliance.
Deadly Alliance was Shang Tsung and Quan Chi, which interestingly I found sort of, you know, called upon in Scorpion's Revenge.
Right. Yeah. I mean, listen, you have to immerse yourself in this thing, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's like, and then when you leave, you're like, okay, they got a new game out. Oh boy. So you guys doing like, you know, any of the Mortal Kombat like project of trying to keep track of everything, that is a tough road to hoe, man. You know what I mean? But like, it did get better. I mean, it's like you said, like Mortal Kombat 2 is great because you can see they go, oh, we've got a hit and we have to kind of like build this out a little bit. But now we're at, I mean, Mortal Kombat X was crazy and Mortal Kombat 11 is just,
it's really dialed it up. Like
it's dialed it up, but I love
to 11.
Yeah. I mean, because I remember when they did the DC Universe one too, and I was like, oh man, we should totally do this as a movie. This would be so great. But I love that, you know, it's sort of like Fortnite or Lego. It's like Mortal Kombat has this ability to bring in, you know, the Terminator and, you know, Ash from Evil Dead. Like, I love that aspect to it. I mean, as a fun thing, but I also love that deep lore of the realms and there's a simplicity to, hey, it's a fighting tournament that determines the fate of everything. You know, and I would be arguing with Ed and Dominic. I'm like, so wait, I don't understand. So if you win, you can still, I mean, if you don't win, you can still invade. Like, yeah, you can still invade. It's like, yeah, but why don't they do that? And it's like, well, because they want to merge. I'm like, yeah, but they could just invade and then they'll own it and then they can fight, you know, and I'm like trying to poke holes there. There's like, shut up. Okay.
See, as fans, we always poke holes in it. So it's so good to hear you say this.
Well, but I also think that's the fun of it, right? Like that's it's like comic books. Like I'm obviously a huge nerd when it comes to comic books. And I feel what's fun for me, especially as a writer, is where are those holes? And can I possibly fill them and do it in a way that would be satisfying? Because as a fan, that's really satisfying to me. If you're sitting there going like, ugh, they left this thread. And I can't believe, I'll give you the best example. Okay, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Love the show. And there's a season, I'm not spoiling it because it was on like 20 years ago. So they ended the episode with Buffy. Suddenly her sister was coming to live with her. And up until that point, we all knew that Buffy was an only child. And I remember being like, what? This is stupid. Like just angry, you know, and luckily there was no Twitter back then. So I couldn't yell about it and destroy my career in as prologue. I was like, this is so stupid. And then what happened was the next year, it was almost like halfway through the season, the mom looks at the girl and it's like, who are you? I don't have another daughter. And I was like, what is happening right now? It was like they just twisted the plot on its head. Yeah. And they were like, oh, she's something different. And so with Mortal Kombat, what I find sometimes is there are these weird little plot holes, and to be able to like sew them up or explore them a little, because I don't know, and you guys will know better than I, they had kind of in like a cut scene, but it was just like splash pages, talked about the Quan Chi disguising as Sub-Zero and killing Scorpion's family. And like, but it hadn't been a scene. It hadn't been explored.
We'll jump into that definitely, because that's coming up and that's going to relate into some of the questions that we have.
All right, go ahead. Give me your questions. I'm going to talk. I'm going to ramble. This hour's going to be over and you're going to be like,
no, we love it because you obviously sound so passionate, and that's something that we love to hear.
No, I love it. I mean, there are times where I hear other people interviewed on certain projects and I think, do you even like the project? You know? And I get very irritated.
Well, that's definitely not happening with this one. I can tell you that.
It's interesting to hear you talk about how, you know, in the comic books, trying to tie together that lore and stuff like that, because you actually had a big part to play with the Flash when they brought Wally West back to life, because you kicked off the whole Infinite Frontier, didn't you?
Well, it's interesting. that's another like convoluted story where Dan Didio, who was the head of DC at the time, brought a bunch of animation writers in and said, hey, we're going to do this thing called 5G, and we're literally going to just push this universe ahead 5 years or something.
Yeah.
But it was going to be permanent. And I obviously have always, it's on my bucket list to write comic books. And I was slated to do a Black Racer thing, which I ended up doing, but it was taking a long time. So my friend Tim Sheridan, who writes on Teen Titans Academy, said to the editor, work with, you should talk to Jeremy. Or I was on a list or something and asked him about it. And Tim said, you should talk to Jeremy. And so he said, would you want to do this Black Adam Future State? And I was like, yeah. And I went crazy on that, right? And then he said, what would you do with the Flash? And I said, yeah, let's quantum leap that bad boy. Let's, I want to have fun. I want to have a Doctor Who timey-wimey. Like, to me, Wally has been beaten on so much. My thing is like, as long as I'm writing him, Wally's he's not going to get hurt. I know that takes away some of the drama, but I'm like, no, he has been beaten on so much for so long. So it was like, I get to bring Wally West back.
Yeah.
And that is a big thrill. And we're in the middle of it now. We're in the middle of the first arc I have where Wally is jumping through time into different speedsters' bodies, and it's a thrill. It's so much fun. It's like, it is just an adventure. It is not something that's high drama. It is not something that you're going to get in trouble if you're a kid reading, which some comics are. I can't tell you how much of a thrill. Like I helped create a character called Gold Beetle, and to be able to have that character enter DC Comics and then be on the cover of the Flash book. It's like, are you kidding me? I get to add to the sandbox. This is the best thing ever. So the Flash, getting to do a fan favorite like Wally West, and hopefully people enjoy it. If you think about it, it's like all these superheroes that are like the big superheroes, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and they all have sidekicks. And this guy used to be a sidekick. Yeah. And then he became the Flash for a long period of time. And like, everybody loves Mark Waid's Flash, Wally West style, and Josh Williamson with Barry Allen and Jeff Johns. And so now I'm coming in after these giants, worked on this book, and I'm just hoping I don't wreck it to the ground, So,
how do you end up writing for DC Entertainment and kind of getting involved with these various projects like the comic books and the movies and stuff?
So, okay, listen, this is a semi-religious thing, so you're going to have to just forgive me if this offends you, but it was really funny. Basically what happened was I was meeting with some nerds for a Doctor Who night. And this was when Chris Eccleston's Doctor Who came out, but it was only out in England. And so we had a friend that would get like a bootleg or something, or I don't know, I think he would get it and it'd come over to the States. So it wasn't airing in the States. And so once a month we would get together, like 4 or 5 of us, and watch Doctor Who. I was really trying to break into the industry, but I had no success. And when I say no success, I mean just no success. I had been like an assistant to a director, assistant to a producer, which was great. Worked a lot at Blockbuster, worked at a bookstore, and I started writing because I was like, man, if somebody does ask me for something, I better have something. So I was writing a lot, because Stephen King's book on writing is a fantastic book, and it was really empowering. So I started writing just a little bit every day, and I started churning out screenplays, and totally scared to give it to anybody. Anyways, there's a guy at this Doctor Who night called Jim Creek. And Jim is a big muckety muck in animation and writing. And I didn't know that. He said to me one time, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to be a writer. And he's like, I'm a writer. And I'm like, sure you are, because that's what it is in LA, right? It's just like, everybody's a writer. And I had literally, when I moved to LA, I was in a Carl's Jr., which is like Hardee's or whatever, a burger joint drive-through. And I remember the car in front of me pulls up to the cashier, and the guy in the Carl's Jr. handed a script to the guy in the car. And I was like, what? And so everybody's a writer. I was like, this is terrible. All right. So anyways, we're still watching Doctor Who. We're probably like 6 months into this. I don't know, maybe longer. And I was just telling my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, man, it sucks. Like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And we had just come back from church, and there was a whole story about, Moses and the burning bush. And I'm sure you've heard that story. And I'm like, oh, look, the burning bush. I go, that's what I need. I need a burning bush. I need a bush. I need God to tell me exactly what I need to do next, because I have no idea, and I am failing miserably. And my wife's like, well, you should pray about it. So I was like, oh yeah, okay. So I talked, had a nice little prayer chat with God, like, listen, I can't work in as an assistant forever. Nobody wants an old dude answering phones for them forever. And the next day I get a call from Jim Krieg, and he says, hey, I know this is weird, but I feel like God wants me to be your mentor, and I want to put you on my show, but I need you to do this, this, and this. And he gives me like 3 things to do. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And I did it. And they put me on Green Lantern, the animated series.
Oh,
and
wow. You worked on that? I didn't realize that.
That was my first credit, was Green Lantern.
I loved that show.
Oh, it's such a good show. Yeah. So I did one called Blue Hope. And then they liked it, and they let me do a second one. And animation is a very peculiar thing. So I did those 2, and then I had nothing. I was working at a toy company as an assistant in licensing. And animation, you write something, and then like 2 years later, you hope you see it. And what ended up happening at the toy company, I kept writing. I was like, oh, you guys should do a cartoon for this. You're a toy company. You have this organic brand. You should do this. You should do this. And I would send them all this stuff. And they're like, you're nuts. And then what happened was Green Lantern came out, and some of the guys I kept sending stuff to were like, why aren't you writing on our show? I was like, your show? What's your show? And they're like, it's called Monsuno. I was like, well, I would love to write on your show called Monsuno. And so I started writing for Monsuno. And then I got moved up to assistant producer in Monsuno. And then on a Friday, I found out my wife was pregnant. And on a Monday, the entire department was let go.
Oh,
and I was like, oh, brutal.
Whoa. So tornado of events.
It really is. And so honestly, in retrospect, it was both good and it was hard, like, because I was super, super poor. And I ended up becoming, a stay-at-home dad for a good 3.5 years. And we were at one point, I thought, I'm going to have to get a job anywhere at night, because we're not going to be able to make ends meet. And then I was doing ghostwriting, a lot of ghostwriting and weird stuff like that, which I don't recommend for anybody. And then Jim got a job at Warner Brothers for Justice League Action. And he said, hey, would you want to write some of these? I was like, yeah. And that kind of started the ball rolling at Warner Brothers. And suddenly I was doing these Justice League Action, they're like 15 minutes, I think 10 minutes, 15. I don't know if you've ever seen them. They're fantastic. Yeah. They're fantastic. And so I did 4 of those. And then suddenly it was like, hey, you want to do this Scooby-Doo thing? I was like, yeah, I'd love to. I'm not going to say no to anything. So I did that. And then suddenly that got me into the Lego space. And then Lego just started giving me tons of work. And I really love those guys. And we started getting along. And so I'd done a lot of Lego, like Lego Superhero Girls, Lego Flash, Lego Shazam, Lego Aquaman, all those. And then we had pitched to my friend who ended up becoming the showrunner of Supernatural, a Scooby-Doo Supernatural crossover called Scooby Natural. And we did that, which is fun because we had to write that a year in advance. And everybody loved that. And that ended up getting me a little more oomph. And at that point, I had just done really young kids stuff. And then they said, you want to do Mortal Kombat? And we were laughing because we were really trying to pressure marketing and PR to put out a trailer that said, from the people that brought you Lego Flash and Lego Aquaman and Lego Shazam, Mortal Kombat. Like we really wanted people to, like, the juxtaposition is huge. And so that was my first kind of like adult, older, obviously animated movie, and then Batman Soul of the Dragon, and now Justice Society that just got out. And then I went to go work on Supernatural for the last season as a story editor, writer, and that was really fun too. So, Mortal Kombat kind of broke me into the space of more adult fare, which, is where I like to be.
That's so cool.
More mature stories, And I don't think kill to do a live action one, kill to do a live action, anything with guns and ninjas,
I don't think your fixation on the gore of Mortal Kombat would have translated well over to Lego. So
no, not at all. They have very strict guidelines. but we have this really fun animated kids like martial arts show that they sent me over to China. to take part in. And I think like the first week of the first one got like 59 million views. It's called Monkey Kid, and it's going to be released sometime, hopefully soon. I keep saying that because I keep being told that it's going to be released soon here in the States, but it's fantastic. It's animated by Flying Bark, who had done like Rise of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So it's this amazing animation style. And again, it's in that wheelhouse of, oh, I like martial arts and people getting kicked in the face. And that's so.
All right. Well, you then moved on to Mortal Kombat Legends, Scorpion's Revenge.
Yeah.
My first question is, why Legends?
Well, there is we had a big meeting about titles and what we could do, how we could separate ourselves into our own little niche of Mortal Kombat, and people wouldn't be that confused. Like, we don't want to, we want to make it was more of a branding issue, and it's legally allowed too, So Mortal Kombat Legends gives us kind of an overarching brand. Like, if we could do more of those, we could say Mortal Kombat Legends, Sonya's toe blade or whatever, It's like you could do that sort of thing. So it gives us something that we can, what the hope is that it's successful enough that people will go, man, we really want these, and we could just make a bunch of them,
Mm-hmm. Like a sort of animated universe for Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
And so you decided to start off at least with focus on Scorpion. Why? Yeah. What was the decision to sort of retell the age-old Mortal Kombat story, but with this sort of focus instead?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just a jumping off point for fans and non-fans alike. So the story of Scorpion in that context, I think for me, I mean, the honest truth is I wanted to keep the focus on him even more, but it needs to be a retelling of the first tournament, but also give it just enough of a flavor of like, hey, this is something a little different. I know there's a lot of fans that are like, oh, this is just the thing we've seen before. And this is kind of like, well, here's a few other things to help you along. Because if we can get this out of the way, if we can get this kind of like the first retelling of this, and we add enough stuff in there that you feel like it's new enough that you'll stay on, then if we do another one, then you'll know it's like, okay, it's like the origin story in any superhero movie. It's like, okay, we got the origin out of the way. Now we can tell other stories.
Yeah.
And that's the goal of that, was just kind of like a launching platform for people.
So when you started off the movie, you had the scene with Hanzo and his son actually talking about the backstory of a scorpion and how it's will that kind of makes it so menacing. Was there kind of an inspiration for this scene? Because I mean,
that really happened to me. It wasn't a scorpion; really? It was a mantis, and it was a mantis and some ants. My parents were divorced when I was very young, but one of the things I really remember my father saying is like, look, you can see this mantis, and this mantis isn't going to go down without a fight. Like, it's being attacked and swarmed, but it keeps going. And so that's always stuck to my brain. And so this was kind of a way to take that and twist it a little. Like, basically every time I write, I'm excising some weird demon from my past. So that is where that kind of came from. And I'm very much in the mindset of, if you knuckle down hard enough, it's kind of the Rocky thing. It's like, you can overcome anything. And I think when you have something as just and righteous as Scorpion's family being murdered, you get it. Like, I'm a family man. I get it. And it's like, no. And what was interesting when we wrote it, and I remember writing it, and I remember people being like, this is really dark. And actually Rick, I think, had animated his son being killed, or at least, we had seen it. And this time you see it, but it's not as graphic as it was because you can only do so much, But I really feel like when you watch the prologue of Scorpion's Revenge, there's so much emotion and there's so much intensity in there. And when you see Hanzo frozen, like, I'm going to kill you, it's like you kind of believe it. So that's where that came from.
It's a beautiful inspiration.
Oh, yeah. You could have saved that scene for when they do a remake of Fox's The Mantis. Yeah. That was like the big 90s show.
I remember that with Carl Lumley, who also plays Martian Manhunter and was just in Falcon Winter Soldier and Alias, which I love. I freaking love Alias.
So, next up on the movie, let's dive into the lore a little bit. Okay. So, we have the whole scene where Hanzo actually gets killed.
Yeah.
The route that you went with this movie was more like what we had seen in Mortal Kombat Legacy, where it wasn't actually Sub-Zero. It was Quan Chi all along.
Yeah.
And it kind of differs from the video game a little bit, because in the video game, it was Quan Chi that basically hired out Sub-Zero to kill his family.
Right.
I'm curious, like, what was the inspiration from that? Was it from Mortal Kombat Legacy? Like, you guys just kind of liked how that story went and you decided to go that route?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Also, I feel like Sub-Zero gets, he kind of gets the shaft a little bit. Like,
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, I didn't mean to do this. Or like, this isn't me. What are you talking about? But it also lends itself to, obviously, his brother and that whole story. And I think that's important too. Mortal Kombat has so many characters, you can only do so much. But we were trying to also weave in the idea of Quan Chi and, Shinnok and all that stuff, because I think that stuff's important. And I think hopefully we'll get a chance to explore it even further. And so if we're going to explore it further, we need to set up some of those guidelines. If we had just done, he hired out and he did this thing, then there wouldn't be as much of that manipulation. Like there's this moment in Scorpion's Revenge where Scorpion is literally impaled. And Quan Chi shows up. It's like, oh, guess what, moron?
The typical Quan Chi thing,
right? And then you see Scorpion, grab the thing and start pulling himself out, and you as an audience are like, oh hell yeah, and that's like that. That's you're trying to build to that like catharsis of. There's this Rambo 4 is the best way I can explain this. Rambo 4. What's great is if you grew up in the 80s, you've seen Rambo 1 through 3. And you know that Rambo has defeated all the Russians, and in Rambo 4, it's like there's a spec ops guy and hey, boatman, just stay in the boatman. And you're thinking, oh, buddy, you don't even know. That's Rambo. And when you unleash Rambo, he's going to come for everybody. So at the end, when Scorpion shows up and kills Goro somewhat unceremoniously, and is like, oh, okay, they're basically rigging the game in a way within the context of the rules. And at the same time, we leave it on that very that's our Empire Strikes Back note where Liu Kang is like, wait, I was supposed to win this thing, and Raiden says to him, it's like, oh no, you're not supposed to win this. You're supposed to win. You're supposed to beat Shao Kahn. And so there is this long game that Raiden's playing and that everybody's playing this weird chess match. And what I hope, especially if we get another one, you can see where that long game plays out and it'll make more sense, because Liu Kang also doesn't have a prominent role in this particular movie. And that's intentional because I want to be able to make a prominent role for Liu Kang in a movie.
Yeah. It's funny you talk about Sub-Zero, because on the scene where, Scorpion shows up and faces him at the end of the movie, the whole time I'm thinking, this poor guy has no idea what's going on.
He's just like this dude's just coming at me, but that's the other thing about Scorpion. He is hell-bent on revenge, and Raiden is kind of talking to him, and they're all kind of like, there's more to life than revenge. There's more to life to this. There's more at stake. And that's the thing that kind of pulls him a little bit. But at the same time, he makes damn sure he gets his revenge by the end of that movie, and that's it's a dark scene. It's like, my God will avenge me. And he's like, damn, your God. And it's like, and I'm sitting there writing this going like, man, this is messed up. I can't believe they're going to let me do this.
I can't believe there's going to be a cartoon.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Yeah. Did I say that lore correctly or did I miss something?
No, you did actually miss something. Basically, what we were asking about with regards to the inspiration of MK Legacy was you used the sort of legacy Scorpion Shirai Ryu being killed off by Quan Chi scene, right? Now, in the games, what actually seems to have happened is that Quan Chi is hired by the Lin Kuei to get rid of the Shirai Ryu. So we never actually see him pretend to be Sub-Zero, and although that can be argued to have been the case in MK9. Just clarifying on what FANTiM said. One thing that I found quite interesting as well, in terms of inspiration from Legacy, was you used Scorpion's, Hanzo's wife and child's original names, Satoshi and Harumi, rather than the retcon pet names.
No. I mean, it really was a conversation, and it was us going to Dominic and the people at NetherRealm and like, which one do we use? And they're like, this one. I'm like, okay. It is a weird thing because I do think that Mortal Kombat's gone back and forth on different things, and we're trying to be additive, but at the same time, this is kind of an alternative universe version of Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
So we're not going to get everything right, mainly because we don't have the time, and they didn't know if this was going to be a success or not. So it's like we had to condense some stuff.
To confirm, by the way, we're happy that you went with the originals.
Good.
This is a good thing.
Good. Well,
if anything, you got it more accurate than some of the other sort of things in the series.
I know. I was thinking about that. Like, what would I have done? And it's interesting because we had to cut out some stuff in ours, and just because of time. And there was so much more in my mind about Sonya, and I was thinking about this in general because, like, I'm sure you watch movies and you think, well, how would I have done it? And I think about that. Sonya in particular is an interesting character that doesn't get explored as much as I would like her to be. And the idea that she is somebody that is a female in a predominantly male, military, and she's really good. So she has that kind of pressure on her. And then at the same time, she's very mission driven. And I was thinking about some of the current Mortal Kombat things, and I thought, oh man, there's just a lost opportunity. Like, she's not chosen there either, and she's still trying to prove herself for being a soldier. Like, that could have been a real interesting thing. Sonya as the chosen one would be interesting too, but whatever.
With Sonya, you added like a whole new dimension to that character, something that we hadn't seen in previous Mortal Kombat incarnations.
What, her foul mouth?
I don't know. Ronda Rousey might have added some of that.
The thing is, I was a big fan of Dexter, and Jennifer Carpenter was
Dexter's
that
sister.
character. Yeah, right. And she just foul mouthed and rough. And so when I was writing Sonya, sometimes you kind of cling to, like, who would be the character you'd want to be this character. And I literally wrote it for Jennifer Carpenter. I didn't know we were going to get Jennifer Carpenter. I didn't think that was a possibility. And then it was like, we got Jennifer Carpenter, and I was like, and so that was really fun. And she was great. But yeah, she's pretty hard in this. She goes pretty hard in this.
At the beginning of it, when it's kind of going through her flashbacks and she's thinking about how she's, people have always been like, you're just a little girl. You can never do that.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Captain Marvel movie. There's the same way they kind of did that sort of thing there. But I think you did it better.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, I wrote this before Captain Marvel came out. So I want everybody to know I did not rip off anything. I have two daughters, and they're in the throes of that, where, my oldest daughter would come back and say, yeah, I'm not, I can't do this because I'm a girl. I'm like, oh, hell, you can't. Like, so
it wasn't so much like a gender politics you want to write into, as more actual real life experience that you're putting into your story.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the misogynistic piece of it is this, and is that when I found out my wife was pregnant, I was like, oh man, I hope I have a son. I mean, I'll be really honest. I was like, oh man, I hope I have a son so I can play lightsabers and we can do this and do this. And my friend looked at me and she said, you can do that with girls, right? And I was like, what? And that was like right before, like, the new Star Wars movies came out, DC superhero girls. So my career suddenly moved, and I started doing Lego DC superhero girls. And I started going like, hey, look, Gold Beetle is a girl in DC Comics. Black Racer is a girl in a comic, because I have two girls and I want to kind of give them something to look back. Like, look at my dad built these worlds and these ideas for me. And so with Sonya, it's one of those things too. It's like, she's a BA warrior, and I kind of wanted to give her some hook to be like, this is why her psychology is like this, And again, these are, what is Mortal Kombat Legends? It's like 79 minutes. They all should be 2 hours long, as far as I'm concerned. But and in fact, we have to cut out a lot, because it's just like they're like, Jeremy, you turned in another giant script. I'm like, listen, this isn't my fault.
It feels longer than it is. In a good way. Yeah. So you were talking a little bit about the voice casting. Did you really have any input as to the voice actors that you had in mind while you're writing this?
Yeah, so Jennifer Carpenter for sure. Yes. Basically, they go, who do you want to be in this thing? And you give them a wish list. And then they go, yes, we can get this person. We can't get this person. We can't, they do that sort of thing. Or they go out to people. And the fact that we got Joel McHale as Johnny Cage was just so good. And listen to me. I'm telling, if there is anybody in the live action Mortal Kombat space, I know everybody wants to have what's his face is Johnny Cage, but I'm telling you,
Ryan Reynolds.
Oh no, The Miz. Everybody's like,
The Miz, yeah.
But I'm telling you right now, Joel McHale is ripped as all crap.
Oh, he is.
It's like, he's sarcastic. He can act. He'd be so freaking funny. And what was so great about it was Ed Boon, I think that was one of the good things too. It's like Ed was so enthusiastic about the project and he was so complimentary that we were so collaborative. And at the last Mortal Kombat tournament or whatever they had, and they introduced the trailer for Mortal. He really promoted the heck out of.
Oh yeah, Final Combat, right?
Yeah, and he had on his Twitter account and everything, and he was so gracious, and it felt so good to know that. Oh, look, these are the guys that we really have to please, and they're pleased. So,
the real backing of the actual creator, that's awesome.
But Joel McHale, man, he really knocked it out of the park. And he would improv off stuff, or he would say, man, this line is really dumb. And I'd be like, oh, geez. But in a way that he's like, we've heard that 1,000 times. What if we did this? And I got to tell you, being in animation, sometimes you will stunt cast, aka get a celebrity to do a voice, and it's not great. And it's not like they just want to come in and go out. Joel actually cared. He actually was like, to the point that Wes Gleason, who's our amazing voice director, was like, okay, we're good. You don't need to do it anymore. Because he would just keep going, and he would do these incredible takes, and then he would make up another joke, and then he would do this, and we're like, all right, he was so willing to contribute, and that's such an incredible thing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
With the consultations and stuff, did you get to talk to John Tobias also at all?
I didn't know. I mean, our main touch points were Ed and Dominic, and those were the main. Yeah,
that's impressive, especially because he made a lot of the original lore, and you managed to capture a lot of that in this movie.
Listen, we relied heavily on them. So I don't even know how to say Dominic's last name. It's like Shin Chiolio.
Yeah, it's been a point of contention on here.
but he's like the coolest guy, and he's the one who has it like so straight in his head. But there's a lot of those guys there that like, I don't know the answer, but I'll get you the answer. So we really tried to go down the straight and narrow with what they wanted. The other thing about Mortal Kombat, which is hard, is, if we get to do more of these, the thing that I'm somewhat afraid is that people die, and every character is somebody's favorite character. And that's the thing that I'm always just like, oh, geez, if we get to do more of these, we're going to have to kill people off, and that's going to make people angry, because you can't just have everybody be okay, because that's not the game,
I think one way we can sort of calm your worries about that is that it's Mortal Kombat and everybody dies.
That's right.
Everybody comes back.
Everybody dies, everybody comes back. I mean, that was the thing. That was the worry with Jax and Goro, and Jax getting his arm ripped off that way. But I have plans for that. So, again, it's about condensing, and the choice was, do I put Jax in or don't put Jax in? And it's like, but if I put Jax in, I can set him up for something else. And that's my goal. And I'm hoping that will pay off, because there's so many characters you have to service.
Speaking of Jackson, the way it was done was the Mortal Kombat tournament hadn't actually begun at that point, right?
Right.
And so was that one way of demonstrating Shang Tsung's kind of sneaky side?
Yeah, it's like, these are the rules, but hey, these aren't not the rules. Like, the whole emphasis behind Sony is like, I'm looking for my partner, and getting kind of like sucked into this game, but also raising the stakes in terms of Jax. Like, oh, look, in terms of a Mortal Kombat thing, it's also us trying to give you something new that you weren't expecting, so that it's like, oh, wait, Jax just got his arms ripped off. And we all know that's going to happen. It's just a question of how. It's happened in so many different ways at this point. Right. But when I was writing it, part of it was that it was the forearms of Goro. I was like, oh man, it's such a like almost a crucifixion in a way.
Oh yeah, like an iconic scene.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, look at his arm, and her just connecting. Like, I found him. I immediately found him, and then this is what's going to happen.
Yeah,
is brutal. And of course, we did this kind of like Enter the Dragon Island, kind of in the middle of all the realms in a way, neutral zone type thing. But yeah, it's crazy.
With Sonya entering the tournament, so you said that she was looking for a partner. Do you mean that she was looking for Jax, or kind of like the original lore where she had a partner that was killed by Kano and that sort of thing?
No, in my mind, it was always like, she's looking for Jax. And because Jax is her partner, and it's like, okay, I'm going to track him down no matter where it goes. And of course, there's a bunch of things I probably would have done differently. Like, would I make Johnny as stupid for so long? I don't know. I mean, it's funny to me because what we were really trying to do with Johnny is like, he literally thinks this is a movie for a long time, obviously.
Yeah.
but we were trying so hard not to have him fight for until the very end, because we thought this will be such a great moment, but we have to do it in a way that he can't fight pretty much the entire time. So even his fight at the beginning, he's just mostly dodging and like trying to get out of the way,
Yeah, and he accidentally drops the building on somebody.
And he double middle fingers a minute later. Like, oh, yeah. And then at the end when he comes in like Van Damme, you're like, and she's like, holy, Johnny Cage can fight, and it's like, yeah, that's that kind of moment you want. So now it's like, oh, everybody knows Johnny can fight now, and that's the humor in that, because the rest of the time, every time he gets ready to fight, Sonya's like helping him out, or somebody else is helping him out. And I don't know. I think that's part of his character a little bit.
Yeah. I think you kind of took that 1990s Lyndon Ashby portrayal and expanded it. And, because that's, I mean, he kind of wrote the book on Johnny Cage because so much of what he did is kind of seeped into people's minds. And,
yes. I mean, that's what I feel like Joel did too. Like, he took what I had and then he amped it with his kind of like sarcastic, whatever. I'm not familiar with who does the voice for the, and I don't want to take anybody's job, but I'm like, Joel McHale, come on, man, just get this guy Johnny Cage in everything right now.
With Johnny, he gets punched in the balls a lot.
We've come full circle to this question.
Yeah.
There might have, I'm telling you, there's like 2 or 3 that we had to cut out. Like, it was just like,
weren't there already 4?
I know. That was the note. It's like, okay, now it's getting egregious. I'm like, is it? Because it's pretty funny.
Are you doing this so that Cassie is never born? Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
I mean, Sonya literally busts his balls the entire movie.
Yeah. Well, it's funny to me because that was his move, and so she just keeps kind of like just nailing him, and it just comes out of it's kind of this weird positive reinforcement. And what's so great about it in terms of the character of it, here you have a guy who's a movie star that probably has a lot of women that want him for something else, and here's this woman that comes in and is just like, I don't care, and I'm going to kick you in the nuts, and it's like, and of course that's like, I love this girl, like that's his thing. I
was curious. I was so curious if it was more like, you just enjoyed the humor of it, or if you've never been punched in the balls and you didn't know what it feels like.
No, trust me, I've been kicked in the balls way too many times. So, but there is the humor aspect to it, because I think internally in the psychology, Sonya is going, it's this kind of like, I cannot be attracted to this idiot, like this is stupid, and it's kind of like her acting that out a little bit. It's like, I'm going to make sure that I am not going to have the feels by kicking this guy in the nuts. And obviously, when I do that so many times, this guy is going to leave me alone. Of course, Johnny's like, she cares enough to kick me in the nuts.
To any women listening to this, please do not do that. It will not make them fall in love with you.
That's how you get a boyfriend. I just tell you right now. That's how my wife did it for me. And no, just kidding.
So you mentioned, well, we talked just now about Johnny, not fighting. His scene is against a Tarkatan. Can you confirm whether or not that's supposed to be Baraka?
I don't think it's Baraka. I think it's just one of the actual race of them. Mm-hmm. So
what about Sonya with
same with that.
Okay.
That's how I feel. Because
it's not Reptile or Baraka.
No, I don't think. I mean, listen, maybe this is just one man talking, but I never thought that. Because I would rather be able to use those the quote unquote characters that everybody knows over and over, like later on.
I just wiped away a tear, by the way, hearing this. Keep going. Well, no, this is a good thing. This is a good tear.
because to me, it's like, if we establish that there's races like that, then that gives us a lot more room. And in animation, it's not like you can do everything. It's like you have to actually pay people to make the model of a character, and then you have to animate that character, and then you have to do blah 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 blah. So like the Black Dragon, they all look somewhat uniform because that's going to save us some money so we can do some other stuff. And so if you can make these characters that are also a race of characters, then or a particular race, then we can reuse them later on if we get more opportunities. And then you can give them more. To me, we see this character, he died. And honestly, I mean, the other thing is, I don't even think, I mean, aside from Reptile getting killed the way that he gets killed, or I won't even say Reptile, I think the characters, if they're the actual characters from the game, should get probably a little more, before they're killed.
That's good to hear. At least you didn't name drop Reptile's original name, right? like they did in the live action movie. Like that kind of takes away a lot of hope as far as seeing that character again.
Yeah, no, that's how I feel. I mean, that's how I feel. I mean, maybe some other people are like, yeah, that's Reptile, but I never felt that way, because as a writer, I want to have an out so that I can go ahead and bring him in if I needed to, if I get another chance.
That's one thing that I've noticed from the fans. So obviously, you have a lot of people who their favorite characters are Baraka or Reptile or somebody else who is considered a jobber, right? And the jobbers never really get their time to shine, and they're just used as fodder. So it's really nice. That's why I'm saying I wiped away a tear. It's so nice to hear that you even place importance on those who are considered jobbers at this point in the universe.
Yeah. No, that's kind of that's one of my favorite places to play, because I'm a big fan of finding those characters that are somewhat not as beloved, because then the bar is so low that if you get to do something cool to them, people are like, "This is the greatest rendition of this character ever." I don't know.
Under the same vein, there's a couple other characters I'd like to mention, and I just want to kind of confirm. So you have a centaur, so I'm assuming that's not Motaro.
You're right.
And then there was also like a Oni that seemed to be kind of inspired by Moloch. And I think the torturer for
he tortures Hanzo at the beginning, and then you also have the follow-up Oni come in who Hanzo takes off his head.
Yeah. So I mean, these seem to be all basically inspired by.
That's right. I mean, that's when I talked to Rick and the storyboard guys were mostly in charge of that. So it wasn't even a specific. It was kind of like, who lives down there, Yeah. So
that's cool.
Okay, so I mean, just on that topic then, because I'm wondering about how far it goes with the actual writing as compared to, say, artistic decisions. So the second Oni that we just mentioned looks very much like one of the Oni from Mortal Kombat Mobile. Was that an artistic decision, or you're wrong?
I'm sure that is from the storyboard and art. It wasn't something that I wrote in there, but those guys were doing huge Easter eggs and stuff. So I would put in, especially the main ones. I put in a lot of the locations, but he had to change some of the locations from the games. Like I would put in a lot of the locations from the games. You'll go, oh, we can't do that location from the game, but we can do this location from the game. And there was also some question with NetherRealm, like, oh, we don't want you to use that location. We're like, okay, we won't use that location. So it was interesting.
It reminds me of when we interviewed some of the actors from Mortal Kombat Conquest. They were given a Mortal Kombat Bible from Midway at the time, and the same kind of things. It was like, you can use these characters, but you can't use these characters. You can use this scene, but you can't use this scene, and stuff like that.
Right.
That was kind of handed off to them.
Yeah. Ours was a constant dialogue. There wasn't anything like definitive that they gave us. It was basically like, I'm digging up stuff like, hey, can I use this? Can I do that? And they're like, yes, no, yes, no, yes.
What inspired you to put Nitara into the movie?
I didn't do that. That was so a Rick Ethan move, and I laughed, and I thought that was so cool, because it was like, I did put Johnny, eating all this stuff and saying certain things, but then like her being the one that's there was really them. That was such a fantastic, like, whoa.
Did you hear about the thought process behind it, or at all? Like maybe they knew that she was possibly being cast in the movie?
No, I don't think that was the case, because they never let us know anything that was happening with the live action world. I think it was mostly like, I think it was just that these guys were like me. When I write, I'm like going in a deep dive and finding things that are interesting to me through the lore. And they were doing the same thing from an artistic level. And they were finding all sorts of things. There are some other Easter eggs Rick's told me. Some of them people have heard, some people haven't. I'm not going to say any of them now. But like, the idea that there are little things from different games in throughout this movie just to give, I guess you could call it fan service if you want, but it's really just like, hey, we're in this world. And again, we don't necessarily have 10 movies to do everything, we only have one, and we want to do as much as we can in that one.
So with doing as much as you can in that one, like there was obviously a lot of inspiration from different parts of the Mortal Kombat universe. Right. I mean, we've mentioned Legacy. We definitely see some MKX in terms of, I'm assuming, the X-rays and such. Yeah. Was that again something that you wrote in with the script, or were the X-rays something decided by someone else?
No, we had talked about it beforehand. And I remember Rick saying like, "Oh, I want to have X-rays. I want to have some of these fatalities and da 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 da." And I was like, "Great!" And so I would comb through different fatalities, and I would comb through different X-rays, and I would put some of those in, but they obviously took it to a different level. They took it to the nth degree, and I love it because the funny thing about the X-ray stuff too, my familiarity with it pre Mortal Kombat X was that there was this great Sonny Chiba movie called Street Fighter back in the 70s, in which they did, this is the 70s, they did an X-ray punch in the middle of the movie, and it's super cool and it's so low tech, but this is like kind of old school way, and so. Rick was very clever about the use of it, I think. And those were some of the first things I saw animated. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so dark. And it was so great, but it was, yeah. It was just, again, Rick and I have done like 10 movies together now. So
cool.
There's a certain element of like, we're just back and forth all the time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it gets mixed up. Sometimes it doesn't. It's really fun because we both, just vibe off each other.
We had mentioned earlier, like how you kind of had Johnny Cage was very similar to Lyndon Ashby's, and you even had the boat scene from the original '95 movie. Like, what other kind of inspirations from Mortal Kombat stuff? Like anything from Mortal Kombat Conquest that kind of influenced your writing with this?
Not Conquest. Though it's funny. I bought all those, and I don't know how to describe this, but I'm such a sucker I'm such a sucker for syndicated television.
Yeah.
And I especially syndicated television of a certain time. And I remember seeing some of that on TV, but I could never find it again. It was on one day and I'm like, where is it?
Right.
So much of it, it's weird because it all blends together in some ways.
Yeah.
There's so much of like there's the 90s element, the 95 element, there's fighting movies in particular, like obviously Mortal Kombat in itself is a derivative of like Enter the Dragon and Bloodsport and all that stuff. So I don't know. I think there's more elements of Enter the Dragon in a way, just because it's Scorpion is kind of doing a little side mission at the place.
Oh yeah. Kind of like how Bruce Lee's character was actually
straight
there
out of a comic book, man. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing that was interesting was how Sub-Zero was written. Now, obviously, he's sort of innocent, as it's actually Quan Chi who's caused Scorpion's pain. But why is he fighting for Shang Tsung in this?
Oh yeah, it's a certain element of like they're still paid warriors.
Okay.
And so it's like I don't necessarily think either clan is necessarily good or bad.
Okay.
They're paid for certain things. And I think he, in this particular instance, didn't know necessarily what was going on. It's kind of like, hey, I need you to be, kind of like, I don't even know. It's kind of like, hey, you're security for this tournament type thing. And it's like, this guy's trying to kill me. Like, there's some of that. There's some of that because I feel like, how do I describe it? Because the Lin Kuei has, kind of this storied
hired assassins, basically.
Hired assassins, but it's also like you got the stuff that happens with like Cyrax and Sector and like all that other stuff. So it gets convoluted even within that own clan. So the idea that, he might be there because he's just being paid to be there. And honestly, because you have Shang Tsung and you have Quan Chi and like all those people are in cahoots, there is a certain chess element to it. It's like, I want Scorpion to do this thing. And so I'm going to put this carrot on a stick and put it in front of him to make him do this thing, because we need to figure out, they're trying to game the system in a way so that Shao Kahn's going to win.
That's very interesting because, on the other hand of this, you have Kano who literally hires out people to assassinate the warriors, bringing in the Black Dragon. And then Sub-Zero turns to him and says, "You've dishonored the tournament."
Right.
So you have these two characters that seem to both be working for the bad guys, and then one of them has honor to him, and then Kano has none at all.
That's what I always felt about like some of these assassins. I do feel like they're assassins, wink, wink, but they also have a code of ethics, in a certain weird way.
Yeah.
And I had to give Sub-Zero some love. It's like, all right, you gone too far. You can't do that. So.
That was my favorite fight in the movie, so it definitely got some love.
Good.
Does Kano actually die when he gets the hammer or the axe thing to his eye?
You said it yourself. No one actually dies.
Hey. Already thinking like an MK person. A person?
Yeah. No one actually died. And listen, I grew up in comics too, so it's like you better chop off their head and burn their body, to make sure they're dead. Otherwise,
right. And even then,
you don't know. I mean, the fact is, Hanzo died and then fought his way out of hell. You know what I mean?
I mean, speaking of Hanzo, I like how you wrote it in that he technically breaks but doesn't break the rules of Mortal Kombat as he's sort of fighting for Outworld.
Right.
What was the idea of Quan Chi allowing a NetherRealm representative for Outworld? Well,
I mean, because in this, I believe that Outworld kind of had purview over those other realms. So I, if I'm right, it's like, I'm trying to remember the hierarchy and what they told us, but it's like they do have, like, the NetherRealm could fight on Outworld, because it's just like the Edenians can fight for Outworld, because Outworld now controls those realms.
Yeah.
So it's like, is Katana fighting for Eden? No, because it's been taken over. So technically she's fighting for, it's like saying, oh, Puerto Rico is a territory, not a state of the United States. Technically, they're under our umbrella, so they really fight for our side. That's the stuff in the lore that gets really dicey. So the idea was that, but Quan Chi was looking at something bigger. He was looking at the return of the Mad God, and then that will in a weird way give us all freedom, or whatever that looks like for Quan Chi. But the thing is, it's like Scorpion immediately is like, okay, now it's you versus Liu Kang, and it's like, yeah, I give up. It's like, oh snap, it's like, I mean, that's the tricky thing of that. And then getting the amulet and all that stuff. If anything happens, we'll have to do another podcast to talk over.
Sounds good to me.
That brings me into my last big question about the series. And it's, it's kind of been the point of contention for a lot of the strong Mortal Kombat fans with how this story came about. And that was that final scene where Liu Kang isn't the one who beats Goro, but rather it's Scorpion kind of coming in. And I know you talked about this a little bit earlier, but this whole idea that Liu Kang is the chosen one, but I mean, he's no longer defeating the champion for the other realm. Like he's not regaining that.
Away. Yeah. I mean, but that's the arc. Hopefully that'll be satisfying if we can land it, because I mean, we obviously left it with like a huge cliffhanger where he's sitting there and he's just downtrodden, and there's nothing better than taking your hero and beating the crap out of him and then seeing him rise from that. Because he's at the end of the movie, he's at his lowest point. And it's like, I didn't do the thing I was supposed to do. What's foretelling is the fact that he's like, no, you don't understand. You're not supposed to defeat him. You got to defeat this guy, this bigger thing. And that's what's the most important thing. Like I've only shown you a piece of your destiny, basically. It's like, I know you thought it was just this thing, but it's so much bigger. And that's kind of what we're hinting at. And if we didn't do that, like, let's just say that it's like the 95 Mortal Kombat and he wins. And then it's like, okay, and then we're going to roll right into Annihilation or whatever. It's like, well, we already know this guy is the strongest guy ever and he can beat anybody and blah, blah, blah. So it feels like the stakes aren't that great. But if we're giving you something new in terms of something that you're not sure of as an audience member, because the The only way I can describe it is when I watched Game of Thrones, I had read all the books, and I'm watching Game of Thrones, and I'm like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. I was that jerk. It's like, listen, I mean, I wasn't exactly like the book, you know. And then suddenly, the show caught up to where the book was, and then after that, I was going, I don't know what's going to happen, you know, and that was exciting and also annoying. So, you know, if you're a fan of Mortal Kombat, rightly so, you know, it's like the end of Empire Strikes Back. You're like, wait. Han Solo just got frozen in carbonite and he's gone. It's like, yeah. It's like, well, what happens? It's like, I don't know. We'll have to find out. It's like, and now you're like, oh crap, you know. And the thing about genre is we're all huge fans of things, and we get deeply invested in things. But we have to remember that, you know, it's not over until it's over. You know what I mean? Like, we purposely set up like, hey, I hope we can tell this second story. And if we can, I think those concerns will be addressed. Because, I mean, obviously I wouldn't take the chosen one and immediately, you know, go, this guy sucks. And like, you know, leave that as the last thing you say in a movie. If I didn't have some idea that like, I hope to, you know, give him a chance to shine, you know, that would be pretty dark. You know, it's like, oh, well, we won, but boy, you really blew it, Liu Kang. You know, like nobody wants to see you do anything.
So the Mortal Kombat community, I mean, it tends to be all over the place with how they react to anything Mortal Kombat that comes out. But the story on at least Rotten Tomatoes got 90% from the critics and 87% from the audience, and managed to get, I think it was like $3 million for domestic sales.
That's awesome.
Like, are you happy with this reaction from the community? And is it kind of what you expected?
Well, it's not what I expected. I mean, I really didn't have any idea, honestly. Fandoms can be really hard. You know, having come from Supernatural, even Scooby-Doo, even, you know, these comics, it's like you get an element of people that are like really complimentary and they're great. And then you get people that will find your Instagram with your daughter and post under it, I hope you die, you know? And you just go, okay, that's not fun, but everybody's passionate about the thing, right? And they had told me like, you know, the Mortal Kombat community is really big. And I'm like, sure it is. You know, I didn't really understand how big it was, but it did really well for everybody, I think, and everybody was really pleased. And my job is to respect what has gone before, and I want to make sure that somebody like Ed Boon and Dominic are happy because they're the ones that are caretaking the franchise. And if I'm working for Warner Brothers Animation and we want to be in the Mortal Kombat business, I want everybody to be happy with it. And that's a weird needle to thread. And luckily it felt like not just with I did, but obviously the whole team, which, you know, animation is the most collaborative art form, I swear. I think we all cared about it in a lot of ways. And we were able to do things that we've never been able to do, especially in the kid space. So, you know, the reaction I think was great. I think it's gratifying because even with this live action movie that came out, you know, a lot of people are, you also got to see Scorpion's Revenge. You got to see Scorpion's Revenge. Yeah. And that's really, you know, heartening because it makes you feel like, oh, we must have done some of it right, you know? So you're never going to get it perfect. Even as a writer, it's like you have limited control. Here you go, you know? So yeah, it is what it is.
I know we've kept you for a while. I do have 2 questions left, if that's all right. The first question is related to what you mentioned earlier regarding cut content. Is there anything you could let us know about that? Like what sort of stuff was cut? Would we possibly be seeing it later?
I absolutely cannot tell you anything. I don't know what they're holding on to and what they're doing, but like I sign all these NDAs and stuff that I can't talk about it. I just know that it just expanded some of the scenes, you know?
Okay.
So yeah, I can't say much more.
All right, then I'm assuming I'm going to get a similar answer here, but I'm still going to ask it anyway. Yeah. So now at the end of the film, you actually give us a bit of a teaser as with a scene with Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn, sort of teasing the invasion, basically, rather than an Outworld tournament as one would expect from the games and skipping straight ahead to Mortal Kombat 3. Where do you take a sequel from here?
I don't know. I mean, the idea is that, again, I'm going within the strict Mortal Kombat rules, right? Which is technically, according to the Mortal Kombat rules, the idea is that if Earthrealm won, they break their streak, right? So the fact is that now that they've broken their streak, technically they're going to have to, whoever's going to have to win like 10 more times. And, but the same thing I asked Dominic and Ed, Outworld could invade and, just invade Earth and destroy it. And that is kind of the idea of like what they really want to do is merge everything. But if they, like my feeling is, why don't they just invade and then destroy it, and then they'll take it over, and then they can just do a tournament, sure, it'll be a couple thousand years, but they'll eventually win again because they'll have all the people on there, I'm just trying to go within the rules, quote unquote, that the elder gods set up and go from there. So we'll have to see, because if Shao Kahn is sitting there going like, hey, I've been thwarted, the only thing I see is we gotta go in and just take this place now because I was on the verge of winning and now I'm mad. Then we're going to see what that means. That doesn't necessarily mean we won't see another tournament. It just means we'll have to figure out how we get there. And that's all I can say, because otherwise I'll get shot in the face.
So is asking if we can expect a sequel soon going to get you shot in the face too?
I mean, you can ask. I'm just going to tell you, I don't know. I leave those up to the elder gods at Warner Brothers.
All right, then how about a question that won't get you shot in the face? Okay. Although could relate to shooting someone in the face. Yeah. What is your favorite finisher in Mortal Kombat?
Oh my gosh! Listen, this is going to be cheesy, but it's the toasty, because it's just it's toasty. Like, yeah, it made me laugh so hard, and it still to this day makes me laugh. I think I tried to get Joel McHale to say it in that high.
You did, after the building falls.
I tried to get it to be like high pitched, and that didn't work out. But because I think that's so funny. But those are my favorite. There's a couple of the new ones that are just so violent that I was just like, I liked it for its sheer audacity, but I can't think. There's an Aaron Black one I remember seeing going like, oh my goodness gracious,
Steps on the head. Is that the one?
Oh yeah. That's so dark.
So Jeremy, where can our listeners find you? And is there anything you'd like to plug before we let you go?
I have a new movie that I've co-written out called Justice Society in World War II. That is out on digital and will be out on, something else soon. And The Flash, I write the comic book for DC Comics, which has been fun, comes out monthly. And you can find me at Space Kicker on Twitter. So Space Kicker on Twitter, and that is where you'll get all the latest information and stupid observations from me.
We will be leaving a link to your Twitter for those quote unquote stupid observations for sure.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I appreciate your time, guys.
No, we appreciate you.
Yeah,
and
thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of our listeners for stopping by the Realm Kast today. Yeah, Jeremy, again, thank you for joining us on this episode. It was really a pleasure to have you on the Realm Kast.
Oh, thank you so much. I hope, I didn't get in trouble and that people enjoy it.
You can find Yanni and myself, FANTiM, on the Mortal Kombat group on Facebook, as well as Yanni on the Mortal Kombat meme realm. Special thanks again to Uppercut Editions, who are creating the Mortal Kombat Kompendium, for the continued support. You can follow them at Encyclopedia MK on Twitter and the Mortal Kombat Encyclopedia Project on Facebook. You can catch up on all episodes of the Realm Kast on YouTube, Facebook, iTunes, and Spotify.
See the scorpion? No matter how many enemies, it continues on. It is strong, yes. It is fast. But do you know why the scorpion is feared? Its will.